Hello, this is the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm your co-host, Coach Red Pill. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Benway. Dr. Benway, why don't you take it away?
You know, this is like one of those moments where I think we get to show a real good exercise in how stream of consciousness works, because I think the topics we're going to get out of today really demonstrate how my brain kind of functions in that stream of consciousness way. It's funny because we had just done our episode on the Vietnam War,
right.
And I don't know if it's out by this time or not. You audience can tell us, but we've recorded it, and naturally one of the players there, no surprise, is Jack Kennedy. And whenever when we're looking at his performance, and there's a clear distinction between what people think of Jack and what they love about Jack versus what he actually kind of delivered, being underwhelming, if not downright, and nefarious. You and I were talking. It's like, isn't it, surprise how this is completely similar to his personal life as well, and all Jack the philanderer, Jack the 2-minute man, all of those kinds of
Jack the rapist.
Jack the rapist. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, and again, this is where the stream of consciousness really goes. In the act of us dissecting that nature of Jack, we also got into, like, between you and me, how compared to the the slights that constitute the grave errors and sins illustrated by the Me Too movement, it's like Jack is the fucking worst of the bunch. It's like night and day difference.
He's
and
like
we're
the
like,
devil. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, Harvey Weinstein, don't get me wrong, that's a creepy, crude son of a bitch, and he's a little bit closer to Jack, but a lot of the shit that we're seeing get thrown into the Me Too movement is just feels so light and trivial compared to this. And this is the genesis of a conversation, people. I hate to break it to you.
Okay, look, just so that the audience understands. See, Benway and I, we're recording this. See, it's my very early morning, Benway's late night. And what happened was that I got into the studio, we started shooting the breeze, just sort of like a warm up, and we were going through different topics. And all of a sudden we wound up talking about this shit. And so all of a sudden we're like, holy shit, we should just be fucking recording this crap. We talked about the Me Too movement and Jack Kennedy, and so we're going to basically do a little bit of a recap of the conversation we already had and then just continue on. Because what happened was that we did the Vietnam episode, and the thing that I was outraged was that Jack Kennedy is such a piece of shit, okay? The more you look at the man, the more you realize he was a piece of garbage, okay? He was, first of all, he presented this facade of being married to this great woman and all the rest of it, where he was fucking around like a fucking rabbit, okay? No self-control whatsoever. And the things that he did, I was referring specifically in that episode to a woman named Mimi Alford, who's at the time, 1963, she was a 19-year-old child. And he essentially raped her and passed her around to his friends. He got her to give some assistant of his or some secretary or something a blowjob in the White House pool. Benway and I talked about it, and we were like saying, no way on earth would any other president have done such a thing. You go back, Eisenhower, Truman, even Roosevelt, or any of the others before there, Herbert Hoover, Calvin Coolidge, Woodrow Wilson, none of them would have done such a thing, right? But this guy, I mean, not even Calvin Coolidge would have fucking done that. Okay, Calvin Coolidge of the Teapot Dome scandal, Calvin Coolidge of the what? What?
It's like there's certain levels of corruption, right? I mean, and it's not like American presidents were saintly, but there's a certain corruption that have hitherto, I'm sure there's certain exceptions, but mostly the corruptions are about making a little bit of money,
right?
Probably using a little bit of extra force against people who you don't like,
or helping out your friends because you owe them favors.
Exactly. And then there's a whole nother level of like passing the bong hit literally, and the bong being a woman, because that's the other thing. That when you mentioned Jack was passing her along, it's like that's not the first time I've heard stories of Jack passing people along to his friends and family. Marilyn Monroe, is another famous example where like Jack starts her off and says, "Okay, Bobby, you go finish," that kind of thing. It's like a common thing for him to say, like, let's pass around the chewing gum.
Yeah,
there's a sickness to that, man.
Completely, and also it's a way of controlling the people around you. Okay, and it's of course the psychopathy of a man who did not have any control. Okay. Anyway, going back to the Kennedy thing, because in the Vietnam episode we were just furious that he presented this facade of being good guy and not for intervention and all the rest, and it turned out that he essentially authorized the assassination of a foreign head of state. That's what he fucking did. And Ken Burns, in the documentary that we talked about, he sort of like begrudgingly admits it. But he doesn't really put much of. I mean, he puts a little bit of a spotlight on it, but then he never refers to it again. But that was basically the original sin of Vietnam. John Kennedy authorized the assassination of President what's his face, right? In
Yes, yeah, and
63.
here's what's interesting about that, because they were thinking about doing this for a while, and I'm going into the details here because it tells something about Jack. Uh, they wanted to get rid of Diem for a while because whatever, he was corrupt. They didn't like him, give up for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the thing: all the people who were really thinking about it hard said the problem with doing that is no one really is competent enough who's going to replace him, and it's just going to get even more corrupt and more of a problem.
Right.
And they decided, fuck it, we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that's just representative of that whole first era of that war, right? It's like, well, we're going to fuck up, and you know what? We're going to have to do more, shed more blood and fuck ourselves over a little bit more. But hey, fuck it, man. It was the right decision, or it made sense at the time. That just sounds like, that's Jack. Jack did that a number of fucking the same thing several times.
Yeah.
To the detriment of all involved.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we're talking about the Kennedys because the Kennedys, to me, they epitomize corruption. They epitomize and not merely money corruption, because a lot of times people say, oh, well, they didn't take any money, and they say, oh, they're not corrupt because they didn't take money. There are lots of ways to be corrupt. You don't necessarily have to be corrupt over money, right? You can be morally corrupt. And I think that there was a sense of moral bankruptcy to the Kennedys, and it came from their very election, the election of John Kennedy, because after all, that was a stolen election. Everybody knows it. The Illinois and Texas votes, they were stolen. Illinois, you had Mayor Daley, who basically called up old Joe Kennedy and asked, how many votes do you need to win? Jesus.
Pretty much. Well, and what's funny about that, because I'm glad you brought up Daley, because I was going to use him as the example of the differences in the various kinds of corruption. Because Daley was corrupt in a lot of ways, but he had a good line, which I always took as a good lesson, which was someone said, like, hey, Mayor Daley, why are you getting jobs for your friends, family, associates? He says, hey, if I can't help my friends and family, who can I help? Kind of attitude. And that's the kind of like, what? There's probably, there is a healthy-ish kind of corruption, which isn't, it's not perfect, but it's like you can live with it. Like you said, you gotta, like Donald Trump probably had to pay bribes to get buildings put up. Okay, sure. I get it. Yeah. The politicians like, hey, for those helping out, who helped me out, I'm gonna say, hey, here's a little job at the patent clerk office. Don't worry about it. And that's, a lot of presidents did that.
Okay, what you're saying is basically you're saying that there is a certain degree of corruption that happens, but it is at a level that is usually for the almost the welfare of specific participants in the machinery. But there's a difference between that and the moral corruption that we're talking about, right?
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't be ashamed to tell your parents that, right? Daley, if Daley said, oh, I got my little friend a job, at the office because of things he did for me, everybody would say, God bless you, you're taking care of your family.
Exactly.
Jack's not telling anybody who's fucking in the pool and handing it over to his brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That if you're afraid to tell, it's like a fucking cliche, but it works. If you're afraid to tell your mother, it's bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great rule of thumb. Yeah. I mean, if you're afraid to tell your mother the details of what you did, then what you're doing is fucking wrong. I mean, like, do you hear of any faggot telling his mother the details of his pickups at the club while snorting, poppers, while they're fucking each other up the ass? No, you don't. Okay, that proves the point. Okay, would you feel ashamed to tell your mother, yeah, I gave, Joe Doe, a fuck up buddy of mine or fuck up cousin, I gave him a job, basically a no-show job, just because the son of a bitch is a drunk, but he's got a wife and 2 kids. Your mother's going to say, well, okay, I understand. I mean, that's the difference. That's the different kind of moral corruption that we're talking about.
Precisely.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the Kennedys, they were all just so fucking... What I hate is the hypocrisy of them. I hate that hypocrisy. And I hate that they look down on everybody. And they had all of their followers look down on others. Like they're like the Camelot up in the sky. But they were just... okay, like look. Old Joe Kennedy, right? Old Joe Kennedy, the father of John Kennedy and this whole brood, right? I could respect him because he was a tough son of a bitch. He didn't come from nothing. He was his background was fairly well off. He went to the good schools of the lace curtain Irish of Boston at the turn of the century. But he was a smart son of a bitch, and he got ahead on brains and drive. I mean, the guy, he was driven. He was a man. He was a high T man, no question about it.
Well, it's similar to Trump in the sense that yeah, they came from money, but the wealth, the extreme wealth that they had, that's self-made built, and it's it's stuff that you have to get your arms dirty for. In the Joe's case, it was literally bootlegging,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
that's how.
Well, no,
And
no, no. It was not bootlegging per se. Everybody says it's bootlegging. It was just whatever business clearly presented a financial advantage, a good ROI. That's what he cared about. He didn't give a shit about the morality of the business. That's why he was in film, because film, gives good profit. That's why he was in bootlegging. It gives good profit.
he did a little bootlicking too.
Yeah, well, yeah, but very little for a man like him. He got away
Yeah.
with a lot. Um, and the thing is, it was really funny. His Achilles heel, and the thing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt played like a fiddle, was his desire for respectability. It's so funny because how can I put it? Okay, I can speak for myself that my own background is such that the desire for respectability has not been high on my priority list. For other people, it is, and I've noticed that usually the desire for respectability is because they come from a background that is either lower class, like the parents were lower class, or the grandparents were lower class, and they want to, seem to be like to the manner born, right? I think that is a weakness, and it can be easily manipulated. And a case in point is how FDR manipulated Joe Kennedy, because FDR brilliantly made Joe Kennedy the first chief of the SEC. And he made it clear to Joe Kennedy that he needed the SEC to be squeaky clean. And the rationale that FDR said, I forget the exact words, it was basically, the best way to guard the hen house from the other foxes is to put the biggest fox in charge. And he was essentially right, because he made the SEC an organization with teeth, the Securities and Exchanges Commission. I mean, you know that story, right?
I actually did not know this story, so please continue. I'm sure other people didn't know it either.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, what happened was that, Joe Kennedy contributed a lot of money to the Democratic Party. He contributed a lot of money to different causes in the Democrats and different candidates, including FDR. Okay, and everybody knew that Joe Kennedy was a player on Wall Street. Okay, Joe Kennedy managed to avoid the crash of '29 because he famously said that when the shoeshine boy is giving you stock tips, then it's time to get out of the stock market. And he was goddamn right. He got out of the stock market, it promptly crashed. And then, of course, he did what every smart guy does, which is he waited a while, waited around a little bit, and when all the stock were really at the bottom and they couldn't get any lower, he swept back in. And in point of fact, it was his buy that signaled to the rest of the market that it was time to get back in. Okay, and it was really interesting because a lot of people suspect that he deliberately caused the bankruptcy of a lot of enemies who started chasing the market to the bottom. Okay, for those of you who don't know, chasing the market to the bottom is when a stock price starts to fall, and you say to yourself, "Ooh, I better buy it now because it's going to go back up." And so you buy it, and say it goes from 100 goes to 90. So you buy it 90, but then it keeps on going down to 80, and you say to yourself, "It's still going to go up, so I'll buy it 80." And then you buy it 70, and you buy it 60, right? But it doesn't go back up. And if you buy on margin, as a lot of people were buying at the time, you can get wiped out. And that's what happened to a lot of people. Because, of course, if you buy a stock at 80, 90, 70, 60, 50, shit, it can go all the way to 10. But if you buy it with your own cash and the stock actually rebounds back to 100 or more, then, it's all's forgiven, right? But what happens is that sophisticated investors rarely use their own money on a play. They are usually leveraged in one way or the other. Sometimes it's very subtle how they are leveraged, but they are leveraged. Leverage meaning that they borrow money to buy the stock, buy the asset. And so by being leveraged that way, they are exposed, because what happens if they don't have the cash to pay the loan that they need, that they got to buy this asset? Because the asset is still so low, they can get fucked over, they can be bankrupted. A lot of people in 29, it's not that the stock market crashed and they went bankrupt. It's that it crashed and they were okay, and it kept going down, and they bought into it thinking that it was going to turn around, and it didn't. Okay, Joe Kennedy was the guy who correctly anticipated when the bottom would hit. Okay, because he also said something very famous about trading. Joe Kennedy is the only one who's of any value of that whole bunch. Okay, That's my experience because I've looked at all of them. Okay, he was the only one who had who had any kind of like, he was fucking smart. And one of the things he said is never sell at top dollar. And that's absolutely true because you never know when top dollar happens. It's only obvious retrospectively. When you look at the chart over the last 5 years, then you can say, oh yeah, that was the top. But at the time, it's very few people can say, this is the top, now's the time to get out. Or this is the bottom, now's the time to get in. Very few people can say that. Joe Kennedy was lucky enough to be one of those guys. And I say lucky enough because it's always luck. And luck always runs out. Joe Kennedy never pushed his luck. I think that's a real lesson of the son of a bitch.
Yeah, there's a trained way to be a gambler, and I mean that in a positive way. How you do the most with what you got and go for it. Here's the interesting thing about Joe, though, is and I agree, arguably there's more interesting things about Joe or more acceptable things about Joe than his offspring, but his offspring are his offspring, and they bear some of the things of Daddy and taking it to the next level. To your point, the Kennedys, always like it's America's royal family. Well, it's funny because they're the offspring of like you said, they're the stock jobber or whatnot. What would have, in the words of Edith Wharton back in the days of the respectable New York, it's like a man of questionable antecedents.
Yes, questionable antecedents. I like that. A man of questionable antecedents. That sounds like the novel,
exactly.
Something out of an MFA program today. But go
absolutely,
ahead.
Exactly. But here's the thing. These are the guys who are learning. Joe's like, I want the best for my boys or whatnot, and the boys, just say like, there's something owed to us because Dad put us somewhere, and he really did put them somewhere. In the case of Jack, and this is what makes me laugh, given everything we know about Jack. Profiles in Courage, his book about
written by Teddy Sorensen.
Written by somebody else, exactly. And then also, and there were a couple other things. He was, and while England slept, all of these great books about like how, we need to fight fascism, or hey, here's what people do when they do good things and everything. It's all a fucking ruse. And it's even to the point where, hey, it was a bestseller. People must like it. You want to know why it was a bestseller? Because Joe bought all the fucking books.
Yeah. That was it. It's so fucking stupid fucking people,
And then here's the thing, that when Dad's like that, you think you can get away with anything.
Yeah, well, when Dad is like that, his kids wind up being cripples, okay? Not in any kind of obvious sense, but they are cripples, okay? Because they can't do anything for themselves. You know something? I don't quite understand a man like Teddy Sorensen. Teddy Sorensen was an aide to the, hanger-on of the Kennedys, a smart man. He wrote Profiles in Courage. Now, let me ask you something. The book won a Pulitzer Prize. Okay, merited or not. Maybe Joe Kennedy bought the prize too. I would not be surprised if you told me so. I've actually not read it. I don't know if it's any good on its merits. But here's the thing. Let's assume that it's a decent book. What do you think Teddy Sorensen feels about the fact that he wrote this book? John Kennedy just slaps his name on it and gets all these accolades out of the book and stuff like that. I mean, how can I put it? Because that is cuckery. That is cuckoldry.
Well, that's the thing. Here's the thing. I could believe a couple of things. The normal person would be like, I really got fucking bamboozled, and you feel upset. But I could easily imagine Jack turning on the toothpaste smile, patting Teddy on the back and saying, you did good by me. I know, and who's responsible for this, and you're a good, loyal boy. And, he could have came in his pants right then and there. There are guys like that.
I'm so far removed from that. And I mean, such men are useful, but I just could not have such an individual in my set. I have somebody so. I just could not have a cuckold as somebody in my stable of friends or associates. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny because Jack, it feels like Jack really had a stable of them, though.
Yeah, he did.
Arthur Schlesinger.
Oh yeah.
I would even argue our other boy we talk about,
Who?
McNamara.
Well, McNamara was more his own guy. Okay, he was like a big brain. Okay, I mean, like Schlesinger, absolutely. Schlesinger was just a sycophant, right? And Teddy Sorensen, same thing. And they were all intellectuals, and they were all credentialed intellectuals, And that's interesting because, you see, John Kennedy and all the Kennedys, for all having gone to Harvard, they were undistinguished students. They were not particularly brilliant in any way. It was just for them. It was just finishing school. Whereas these other guys, they all went to Harvard and stuff like that, but they were actually professors. They got PhDs at Harvard, not just BAs. The BA was just the finishing school. The PhD is the big brain. And they were all big brains, these guys. And they all sucked up to the guy so badly. I don't quite understand.
Well, it's because, like I said, because you'll think about, look at, I mean, you're a big fan of physiognomy.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Schlesinger.
Yeah.
Look at Jack. Jack tall, slender. He can sport the best style suits. Schlesinger's wearing his fucking bow tie balding.
Right.
Schlubby. Jack likes me. That must be good about me. The fact that a great looking guy like that likes me and I'm his friend, that means something to him.
No, he wasn't a great looking guy, though. He was charismatic. He had self-confidence. Okay.
Jack, I mean, I think that self-confidence defined, and let's not kid ourselves, Jack's defined. You want to know why Jack defined the culture of what it was to be like a man? Because the Dick Van Dyke Show is basically the Kennedy family and sitcom. That's the effect of the Kennedy appeal.
That's good. That's a good observation. I don't know. Is that an original observation, or is it something that?
It's not an original observation, but it's been noted that Dick Van Dyke and Rob and Laura Petrie, for those of you who don't know the show, he's meant to look like Jack and she's meant to look like Jackie.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. And you could see it. I mean, and that was the whole big shtick. And you know what's funny about all of this? Because in addition to his sycophants, it reminds me of how Jack was just a thoroughly dishonest and disloyal kind of guy. Because the other detail that people love to forget now, Jack and Nixon were friends in the Senate and and maybe even in the House. I forget if that's.
I don't know if they were friends.
No, they were friends. Like, according to people I've read, they were very close. They saw eye to eye. Jack would on occasion even defend Tricky Dick to a lot of things. But then when Jack realizes he can become president and he's going to run against Dick, things, Jack fights dirty. And the other thing you got to remember, the Kennedy family always fought dirty, always fought people, ironically enough, from the right. And he tried to pull one on Nixon. And Nixon, to your point, was very capable, but I think fundamentally, I don't think we're denying anything here. He's an insecure man. Yeah. And I think part of that is because guys like Jack, who went to the schools that Nixon could have gone to, but couldn't afford to go to,
right.
Always, felt like, he felt like people had it against him, where he had a chip on his shoulder. I didn't go to Harvard. I had to go to Duke, kind of, right. For law school and all that kind of stuff. And so when Jack turns around and says, fuck, Nixon, this guy and everything, talk about triggering, every kind of bad thought he probably had about himself came roaring back. And this is a guy who's supposedly his fucking friend. So the fact, and that says something about Nixon, but it also says a lot more about Jack, because Jack did this a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think it plays into how he treated other people, including the women. And I know that we're sounded like a bunch of white knights here, but I mean, there's a difference between like defending some bitch online who says like, why can't you follow my rules, and like a woman who's literally fucked up the ass.
I want to make it clear on this issue. Like I'm talking about the Mimi Alford case, because my thinking is that okay. Let me put it to you this way. You see, like you said, you're absolutely right. There's a big difference between being a white knight and cucking out, and looking at something and saying this is objectively fucking horrifying. Okay. Like we were talking before about the Morgan Freeman, and everybody's fucking outraged because some chick claims that he looked up her dress on some set of some movie or some shit like that, and asked if she was wearing underwear or something like that, which was probably a joke and a bad one, but so what? I mean, it was like clearly he wasn't going to rape her right there in the middle of, because apparently this was like in the middle of a set of filming. So I mean, like nothing was going to fucking happen, right? I mean, if she was like, for her to claim that she was afraid or something like that would be absurd. And we were talking about the whole Me Too movement and how, the Me Too movement is basically Me Too-ism, okay? Because nobody wants to be left out, right? And so, like, everybody's getting assaulted. Oh, so what are people going to say? Oh, me too. I was assaulted too. Love me too. Praise me too. I'm a victim too. That's fucking crazy, because then all of a sudden everybody's going to be a fucking victim because everybody wants to be praised as a victim. So
the good case of that, that was a little bit earlier, but I think it really demonstrated. It's like the Bill Cosby thing, where I'm like, yeah, probably the first few women coming through probably have a legitimate case to be made. After like
number 70, yeah,
number 70, it's like, okay, it's like he didn't have enough time to fuck all of you. Let's take priorities here, and and I think that there's an element of that, in part because it is this is a horrible thing to think about, but I think it has to be true whether people consciously know it or not. Once something hits the zeitgeist, you figure out ways to be part of the zeitgeist, no matter what
Absolutely.
it is.
Abso-fucking-lutely. You said it, brother. Yeah. Because like, yeah, if everybody's Me Too, then you're gonna figure out like, yeah, that guy over there. I was walking down the street and he looked at me funny, and maybe a booger was falling out of my nose, but fuck it, he looked at me funny. He was
Me too.
raping me with his eyes. Me too. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. Look, going back to the Mimi Alford thing. The Mimi Alford thing deeply disturbs me, okay, because I've seen pictures of her. She was like a nice young girl, nice upper middle class or upper class girl, virginal. Apparently, she lost her virginity to John Kennedy, right? And got some venereal disease, apparently. I'm not sure about that, okay? I could
Oh
be
no,
wrong.
Jack was that was the no. I've heard this too. Jack was loaded. Not only he was sick, with all sorts of STDs and whatnot. So and he was shooting himself up with like vitamin and B2 injections,
Hmm.
all sorts of things. And someone was saying to him, was like, sir, you probably shouldn't take these. He says, I don't care if the shot's filled with horse piss. Give me the fucking shot.
Yeah, actually,
Kind of
it
thing.
was speed. He was
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
shot up with speed, not vitamins, quote unquote. It was some doctor. They call him Doctor Feelgood, but it was it was speed. That was his thing. Anyway, amphetamine. Anyway, the thing about it is, see, I look at pictures of this girl back when she was 19, right? She's like this virginal kid, a child, okay? And yeah, she's a grown up. She's over the age of consent, yeah, like some 19-year-old girl, yes, of course they have agency, but they are easily manipulated rather. And to how can I put this? I find it deeply disturbing that a child like that is manipulated and forced into giving another man a blowjob while other men watch. That's just fucking low. It's fucking low.
Well,
And
there's
to say that
something.
I'm white knighting, fuck you. It's just
No, no, no,
fucking
no, no.
low.
There's something more to
No,
this. It's like let's
I'm
put it
not
this
saying
way.
you. I know that you're not, but anybody listening.
Oh no, no,
No,
no, no. I agree with you
yeah,
completely.
yeah, because
Yeah, I
like
mean, it's like
if it's like the thing of like you're walking down the street and somebody looks at you funny and it's like, oh, rape, then and you defend that, then yeah, that's white knighting. But this isn't. This is just like fucking common decency. You know what I'm saying?
well, this is like again. It's like one of those things. Like if you were there and you feel, like oh shit, this is a wrong thing. It's like we don't have to tell you. You know it
Yeah,
when you see it, kind
yeah,
of thing. And it's like the thing is, this is a recurring theme with these brothers. And go through the list.
yeah.
The same thing. They when they prey on women who aren't in good state. I'll take Marilyn Monroe. We know she wasn't in a good state. I don't think she was killed by anyone. I think she killed herself. That's part of the point. Jack had her first, passed her on to Bobby, and they play with these women who are kind of broken and looking up to some guy for whatever reason they need it.
Yeah.
And that is they use it. And the worst example of it is the
Mhm.
one we all know. It's Chappaquiddick, and it's when
Mary Jo Kopechne, yeah.
Mary Jo Kopechne, again, a little, little young girl staffer probably believed that, Ted was going to be the next president and the next, siring of Jesus Christ and all that shit. And, she convinced he was doing her a nice thing.
Yeah.
He was doing her a really nice thing when, he got out of the car and forgot she was there, kind of thing. It's like
Well, actually,
guys like this.
I heard a rumor about that. Okay, I heard a rumor that was really interesting, and the rumor was just totally different. That it's sort of like the Seymour Hersh Seth Rich murder. That Seymour Hersh heard the rumor that Seth Rich was the guy who leaked the documents, but he was actually killed by a botched robbery, and DC police think that. The cover up happened because it was just so weird that people assumed the worst, that the DNC killed Seth Rich, and it was just okay. The rumor I heard about Mary Jo Kopechne was that she got drunk and went and got in the car to sleep it off, and he didn't realize that she was in the car, and he drove off the bridge, swam, then saved himself, and had no idea that she was there, and went about his business, And he was like, "Oh fuck it, I lost the car. I was drunk. Let's see how I shut this up. Because it would still look bad, right?" And then it turned out that the girl had been in the car. That was the rumor. Okay, we'll never know, of course. I mean, all the participants are dead, and it's been 50
And I
years
have to
since
look back. I have to look back at what people said at the time to see if like it could jive, with it. But here's the thing. Like you said, you don't know either way. The thing is, there's enough circumstantial evidence in the way this family operates and like the specific type of girls these guys go after. Or like, I could believe it that he
Yes,
really
that's the
just
thing. That's why I was comparing it to the Seth Green thing, because see, it
Yeah.
is believable to think that the DNC would have offed the Seth Rich kid because of this. Did it happen? I actually don't think so. I think that Seymour Hersh probably got it right. Seymour Hersh is a man with good info. We all know that. So if he suspects that it was like an actual botched robbery, that just the incredible coincidence that it happened at the same time, yeah. The thing is, see, also what happens in the real world is that people don't believe coincidences, and sometimes coincidences are just coincidences. Shit just happens at the same time. That ties into the Kennedy murders. Because
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't buy this shit that it was a grand conspiracy. Okay, I just don't buy it. Because
By
the thing
that,
is,
let's be clear. You're talking about Kennedy's own assassination, not Mary Jo, right?
yeah, John Kennedy's
Gotcha.
assassination.
Just clarifying. Yeah.
All three of them, the trinity of assassinations: John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. The only one that we know for sure was the Malcolm X, and that was done by what's his face, the leader of the Muslim.
Elijah Muhammad.
Elijah Muhammad, right?
Well, and through his successor as well, the guy who's still running it. What's his name? Farrakhan. Farrakhan was around and active when that happened.
Yeah. And so we know that one for sure. The others, there's Sirhan. Sirhan is supposed to be the murderer of Robert Kennedy. Is Sirhan still alive?
That's a good question. I thought he was, but I could be wrong. I'm like 60% sure he's still alive.
Can you check while we're having this conversation?
Yeah, I'll take a look.
I don't have access to the Google right now. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that, see, I honestly think that there was no big conspiracy to kill any of these three individuals. And my rationale is very simple. See, nobody can keep a secret, okay? If two people know a secret, it's no secret at all. Everybody's going to know. I operate under the presupposition that if I tell one person something, everybody will know about it eventually, one way or the other. And so, the things that you want to keep secret, you just don't fucking tell people, okay? And by the way, most crimes are discovered because the people who did it blabbed. There is a story, I forget the details. This was in the 70s. There was this guy who figured out a way to manipulate the computer systems back in 75, 74, in such a way that he wound up getting like $5 million and nobody noticed it, okay? And it was such an amazing crime, and he was getting away with it scot-free. It was such an amazing crime that at some bar, he wound up bragging about it to some random guy who alerted the FBI, and the guy got caught, okay?
Yep.
People
are too excited to tell a good story, so
yes.
I completely side note, Sirhan is still alive at a ripe old age of 74. Good for him.
That makes sense.
So the other thing about this, and it's similar but different about why I also believe Oswald probably did it on his own and have no reason to believe otherwise. When you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved with an investigation, there will be anomalies because people fuck up.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. People don't know what the fuck they're doing. There's 1,000 people. It's a big enough N or statistical sample where I can guarantee you at least two figures of them were really stupid and incompetent.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yeah.
They were. So if you're wondering
Not
why
even stupid and incompetent, they could have honestly made mistakes. It's perfectly natural. Okay, and to claim otherwise, it's just, you don't know what you're talking about. It's just normal. And so, okay, if there has been an actual conspiracy, like if people sat around and say, you know something, let's get rid of this Kennedy fellow, just get some guy. Oh, we can get this Patsy guy, Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll use him, okay? If that had actually been the case, it would have come out, okay?
Right.
Because people can't keep a secret worth a damn, okay? But, okay, anyway, we've wandered off topic on this whole thing because we were supposed to talk about
but we're circling around. We're circling around all the myths and mannerisms of this family. And the thing is, this family is loaded with myths, and that's the problem for me, right? Because I think we're so excited about the myth of the family that we just we're not even prepared to digest the reality, right? It's just too important. Jack was, a slick-haired guy. He was like, hey, everybody loves to say like, when Jack died, the fusion of the '60s was over.
Oh,
It's like, come on, fuck off, man. I mean, he wasn't even alive through most of the '60s. God damn it.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
kind of thing. But that attitude is like you latch on to someone and you say this guy represents something, right? Because Jack, I would say I'll even give you this far. Part of it is his age, but I think 90% of this was the accident that Jack was the president around the time that a lot of the interesting early stuff with the space race was happening.
Yeah.
So Jack's a forward-looking guy.
Yeah.
Jack is he's the guy who wears his shades when he watches the rocket.
I disagree. I disagree. You know what the issue is, and this is something that you'll notice. See, and this is something you gotta guard for. Okay, look, a lot of guys who are fairly ordinary, they manage to land a hot woman, a hot wife. Okay, a lot of times your perception of the man is colored by his woman, and this is a fact. Okay, look at Kennedy. Just look at him. He's just like some guy, some toothy looking guy. Okay. He's moderately handsome, in a kind of like not very particularly interesting way. He had a hot woman. Okay. That colors other men's perception of him. Okay. This is a completely natural. If you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. A guy who can land a hot woman, he's got something. He's got something that other men don't. Okay, for whatever reason, doesn't matter, but he's got it. That is what influenced
I'll challenge you a little bit on that because the other guy in the White House,
Robert Kennedy didn't have the hot woman.
No, I'm not even saying Robert. The other guy who hit the White House, who's always compared to Kennedy in a lot of ways, went after dogs, and that was Bill. Bill Clinton is married to a dog, and
No. Yeah, but he was never considered sexy.
Oh no, he was, man. He totally was.
I was there.
He was playing his fucking.
He was thought of as
saxophone?
young. Yeah, he was thought as young and vibrant compared to George W. and Ronald Reagan. But no, he was not considered sexy. Okay, on the contrary, they went out of their way to make him not seem sexy because of the whole sex scandals going on. No, the guy was a dog chaser, right? But look, I've seen this in a bunch of different situations where a guy, it'll turn out that he has a hot wife. And that alters men's perception of the man. Okay? He gets like an automatic bump up in respect and like, oh, okay, this is somebody to take seriously because he landed the hot woman. Okay? I'm telling you this is true. And I have seen it. Furthermore, I've experienced it myself sometimes. Okay? Because my wife is a very attractive woman. I don't want to get into the details. But the fact of the matter is, see, other guys respond to a man who's got a hot woman by his side. And they alter their appreciation of the man. They look at him different. And this is a fact. Okay? And I don't think that in the popular culture people have been able to articulate it. I don't think that most men even realize it. But I've seen it. I've seen it enough times that I can say without question. And I think that a lot of that, how can I put this? You do know that Joe Kennedy bought Jackie Kennedy for John Kennedy, right? He bought her. He paid off Black Jack Bouvier's debts, and he paid her like $1 million trust fund before she got married to John Kennedy. Jacqueline Kennedy was an extremely shrewd businesswoman, and she sold herself to the Kennedy family. And she got a good price for it. I mean, she got, a good buck for the bang. You know what I mean?
It's funny because I just keep associating her with her cousins, and those who maybe know her cousins.
The Wells?
No, not the Rat as well. That was marriage to her sister, I think. No, her cousins were the women of the Grey Gardens documentary.
Oh, right. Yeah. Oh, those
yeah. There's
women.
These fucking there's women alone in like a decrepit house in Long Island who are just like dancing to old music because that's all they can remember, and they have like dying cats around them.
Yes.
And I'm like, Jackie's like a half a step away from kind of a crazy cat lady, which may be why I'm more prone to, not be really impressed by the Kennedys, because Jackie never really struck me as like the very attractive woman that, we all need to have. I get why people see it. She just didn't do it for me. Maybe I'll give you that. Maybe that's why.
But for everybody else, no, she was it. She was it.
She's too scrawny, man. too scrawny.
Well, be that as it may,
I know for the time that was the thing.
no,
But,
no,
you
no,
know,
no. She's objectively, she was a very attractive woman, very polished woman, very educated, and that lilting, girlish vibe that she had going for her, she used that very, very well. She charmed everybody who ever met her. Okay.
she to me, she always came across as a cheap Audrey Hepburn. So why don't I just go for Audrey Hepburn?
Yeah, no, to an extent, I agree with you. Okay, that's not the issue. It's not a personal taste thing. Okay, I personally would never go for a woman like Jacqueline Bouvier because she was a whore. You know, upscale, sure, but she was a whore. Okay, never forget that. Because she, at a very young age, realized that she had a lot of class, a lot of breeding, a lot of background, a lot of family connections, but she was poor because her father was a drunk and a gambler. You know, Blackjack Bouvier, right? And because of that, she was very shrewd as to how she positioned herself. She was an extremely ambitious woman. She knew exactly what she wanted. She was going to divorce John Kennedy had he not won the presidency. Okay, and that was a well-known fact. You know, and Jack Kennedy was a horrible son of a bitch. You know, when they had that child, when Jacqueline Kennedy had that child of hers, and the child died in '63. I forget if the child was stillborn, or died shortly after birth, you know, which is a horrible catastrophe for any woman, okay? The son of a bitch wasn't even around. You know, he fobbed off the wife on his brother, you know, which is just fucking sad. I mean, sad because it just, you know, shows once again what a horrible human being John Kennedy was.
Well, this is getting into the thing I wanted to talk to you about, which was like, how do you think she managed through? Because I was wanted to get from you that she feel like, oh, I was paid off and I had my own little flings, or was she just like the sad wife? Because I have because just for comparative sake, because I always feel like we bring them up.
Well, she had her flings while she was married to John Kennedy.
Because like it's different. Like Nixon's wife was like the sad, you know, because she was married to a drunk. She probably was just a broken woman on her own way.
What, Pat Nixon?
Pat Nixon was not a happy woman. By any stretch.
No, she wasn't a happy woman, but she didn't expect to be happy. Okay. You know, one time Gloria Steinem did an interview with her, and they were talking, and Gloria Steinem was droning on and on about it, and you know, Pat Nixon snapped and said, because we didn't have it easy when we were your age. You know, and that's it. That's the answer. Okay. Yeah. She had a rough life. And whatever she had going for her there, and rough life, not in the sense that she was like a low woman. No, she was an outstanding woman. And
she grew up in the Depression.
Yeah, she grew up in the Depression. Yeah. And you know, from her point of view, everything that she had was just frosting on the cake, right? And so she, you know, looked at this privileged generation of baby boomers and thought they were, you know, they were spoiled brats because they were, right? No, my thinking is that Pat Nixon was. You can never know the secrets of a marriage, okay? You can see certain things on the outside. For instance, there was that famous case of you know, Jacqueline Kennedy had spent like a weekend on Aristotle Onassis's boat when John Kennedy was president. And he got so furious that he went down to the pier and said, "Get off the boat." You know, it's just, you know, which is just... You know, whatever.
Well, yes, because it's you know, his property is not following the rules.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you know, furious about it, but not furious about the cuckoldry, but furious that his property isn't doing what he wants it to do. Right? Okay. So, but
because like here's the funny story.
Hang on. And you can see on the outside the stuff of like this child. I think they called this child that died in '63 Patrick, and this child died in as I forget, stillborn or died at birth, which is a tragedy. And the husband, the father of this child, putatively, wasn't around. Okay, this is low. Okay, but these are external signifiers that give you a really clear indication of what was going on inside the marriage. In a marriage like the Nixons, you have no idea what was going on because they were very, very private. They really were private. And the thing is, they were lucky enough that they weren't so sexy that people paid attention, and therefore they didn't write it down. Okay,
but yeah, no one wanted to know what was going on in Nixon's boudoir. It's like, Pat, give me a smooch. You know, comment thing that doesn't really get people in a twist.
Yeah, exactly. And because of that, because of their lack of sexiness, they had a measure of privacy that the Kennedys, John and Jacqueline, did not have. Okay, you know, and lucky for them, and boo-hoo for the Kennedys, right? But the thing is, see, the Kennedys also, they used their marriage to to position themselves that they're so sexy and young and all the rest of it. Okay.
Right.
And look, Jack knew what he was doing by parading his woman around. He knew exactly what the fuck he was doing with that. Okay. And he was just a low man. He just used people. He used people in a way.
Well, here's the other thing I heard. Now, this is pure gossip, but it kind of potentially goes into this. Jack was a shitty performer for a variety of reasons. He was a 2-minute man. He had a little wong, but besides that, he was so doped up all the time.
Yeah, probably that must have been the problem.
The rumor I heard is that he always was fuck on his back because he didn't have the energy to stand up and be over a woman and fuck her. Sure. It just was too much on his system. So he's like had them get onto him.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, darling, we're done here. Because the reason I bring that up is because, and I think this is true, the apocryphal story I heard was that when they went to Johnson talking about the Kennedy brothers' sexual exploits, his response was, "I've had more pussy by accident than those two brothers have had by design together."
Well, here's the thing. See, okay, you're a man, and our audience is mostly men, if not exclusively men. So, look, we all know that when you're too physically fucked up for whatever reason, you got banged up or whatever the hell happened to you, you're not up for sex. Okay. One time, this is years ago, back in 2001, I think, I went to Switzerland to ski with a girlfriend, and I was learning to snowboard, and I crashed so fucking bad. I didn't break anything, thank God, although I think I cracked a couple of ribs, right? But I was so fucking banged up, okay? And we were there for like 2 weeks. I just couldn't do it. I was physically not capable because I was just too... It was like, the first couple of days, sure, but by the third, fourth day of learning to snowboard, I was just so physically demolished that all I wanted to do was sleep. And my girlfriend at the time was like, Jesus, man, I mean, come on, we're here in Switzerland, the Alps and shit, it's sexy. And I'm like, no, baby, I got to go to sleep. I got to recover, And because I was just too banged up, right? And too many pain pills and all the rest of it. My ribs were fucking killing me and all the rest of it. I'm not going to go into the grotty details, but you get the point.
No, but yeah, that's the situation.
But here's the thing. See, if you're so psycho that even in a crappy physical condition, you need to have sex, okay? That speaks of some pathology. That speaks of something fucked up in your head, okay? Because the fact that, this winter vacation back in 2001, I frankly couldn't get it up, even if I'd wanted to, because I was just too banged to shit because of snowboarding. That doesn't, question my masculinity. It just says, oh yeah, I got the shit kicked out of me at snowboarding. And, that was that. No sex for me that fortnight, right? But if you need to have sex under those conditions, then you have to ask yourself, what is fucking driving me that I need to fuck when I am physically unable to? Because this guy was physically unable to. I mean, he was like doped up. He had a bad back from allegedly the whole thing in World War II. Because I don't even know if that fucking thing was true, because God alone knows if it's true or not. If that whole PT 109 shit is real or not. I remember back in the 70s, man, they were still pushing that PT 109 shit. Was it ever
Didn't they make a movie of it? I felt like they made a movie.
I'm positive that they did. Yeah. But was that shit real? I actually don't know. Do you know?
I couldn't tell you one way or the other. I could believe anything. I mean, it's not like Joe's kids were out of harm's way. I mean, like his eldest son died on an air mission.
No, I think his eldest son took a suicide mission when he didn't need to. The guy was psycho. Okay, and I think that he probably wanted to die out there because he was a test pilot or something, which is the most fucking dangerous thing you can possibly do. And he died in an accident. From what I understand, I don't know the precise details, but it was unnecessary. Another daughter got killed in the war on some air flight. But apparently that girl who got killed was like all kinds of, all kinds of.
Well, there was another one who was all kinds of crazy. Like one of the Kennedy sisters got a lobotomy.
Oh, no, but that was different. That was.
I know that was another one, but there's the thing. It's just so. The thing, because part of what we're talking about here is like, what is in the mind of a guy who needs to do these kind of things? It's like, well, there's kind of a pattern in the family, would you say? And, of like, just something a little off, right? With all the kids from various degrees, various things that fucks them up, but they're all kind of fucked up in a way.
Well, what's interesting is that from my point of view, you had Joe Kennedy, who was a very capable man, and he went really far, and he had 8, 9 children, however many there were, and not a one of them was worth a damn. Okay, uh, they all required daddy's money and daddy's help to get anywhere in life. Okay, they were not his equals. Now that to me is a failure as a father, because I want my children to supersede me. I want them to be better than me at whatever they choose to be, but I want them to be better and not need me. Because if a child needs his father's help as an adult, okay, not as a child. When your son, your daughter is an infant, of course they need your help. Okay, that's obvious. I'm saying when they're 20, 30, 40, 50, and they still need daddy's help to get their objectives, that's not a good thing. That's a horrible thing. Because it means that you as a parent failed. Because you as a man, as a father, want your children to be independent. You want them to be able to make their way in the world on their own without having to rely on daddy's help. If they require daddy's help, then they're not independent. You see what I mean? And it means that they will fail once daddy's help is removed. And daddy's help will always be removed eventually because daddy's going to die before they are, for obvious reasons, of course. And so I think I think that he was a horrible father, not because he didn't love them enough or some new age shit like that, some feminist SJW crap like that. Fuck that noise. I'm talking he was a horrible father because he did not make his children independent. Nixon, for instance, he was virtually John Kennedy's twin. They got into the House in the same year. They were friends in the House. Then they went up into the Senate in the same year. But how did they make it to the Senate? How did they make it to the House? Well, one was supported by his dad. The other was supported by a group of businessmen in California who liked this young veteran, and they supported his first political campaign. Then how did he become senator? Well, daddy's money helped John Kennedy become senator. And Richard Nixon, well, he made a name for himself with the Pumpkin Papers and the House Un-American Activities Committee. You may not have liked them. You think that there was a communist witch hunt or whatever, the Alger Hiss thing. But Alger Hiss was actually guilty. He was guilty.
Yeah.
Whittaker Chambers was right.
Well, and the other thing that people always forget about...
Sorry. Nixon took the risks necessary to win. John Kennedy never did. He always had a put on his risks. And that put was daddy. I fucking hate that. I hate that attitude.
What I was going to say, though, is the other thing that people forget is that both Kennedy brothers were on the House Un-American Activities Committee as well.
Oh, right. I forgot. He was too. Yes. And look what one did and the other did not, because he was afraid. And the other had the balls to go for it. I'm talking, of course, Nixon, of pursuing Alger Hiss. Alger Hiss was a big deal. He was a big deal at the time. He was an untouchable. He was a new dealer. He was very well positioned. He was part of what today we call the deep state. And Alger Hiss was one of the chosen one of the deep state. And he was friends with everybody, okay? And Nixon went up against him. Think of the political risk of that. Jesus, the balls, And he won, good on him, man. Yeah. I admire that. What?
He knew how to play. He knew how to play it. Nixon knew how to play it. And, it's funny how, because because part of the reason I wanted to get into this is the whole notion of what we believe is real and what we don't believe, and how we envision, how we construct the truth around the reality, if you will. Mm-hmm. So Kennedy's, the vision of vibrancy, vitality, what we're really saying with those guys, particularly the two brothers who died, was that, hey, they were forever young. They always had the potential to be great. We can think about all the things they didn't do because they died young, right? Yeah. Nixon actually did achieve a lot of substantial things, but we wouldn't like that. We didn't like it because we didn't like the nature of the guy he was. We didn't like that he was on the other team. We didn't like the guy that, that he just never got along with the good people. Yeah. Right. So we've reconstructed the reality, because now, whenever they do polls, right, of this shit, sometimes Kennedy's high, sometimes he's not, but Nixon's always near the bottom. No reason to be.
Yeah. No. Objectively, his presidency was a blazing success on a lot of fronts. Geopolitically, no question. He got out of Vietnam, peace with honor. He made that happen. Vietnamization, it kind of worked, because by 1973, the U.S. was out, and the regime lasted a couple of more years before it collapsed, right? So it kind of worked. The brilliant power play between China and the Soviet Union. Jesus, and the only Nixon could have gone to China thing. That's a reason that the Vulcans use that expression,
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, like Nixon was a great president. He really was. The thing is, he wasn't cool. That's the thing that killed him. He wasn't cool. And the fucking Watergate thing. He refused to do the thing that was so obvious that had to be done, which was give up John Mitchell. The second that shit went down, all he had to do was just give up John Mitchell, but he was loyal to him. And it's a tragedy. But had he given up John Mitchell, who was the head of the committee to reelect the president, President Nixon, of course, given it up and said it was all John Mitchell. John Mitchell's people did this, and I think it's horrible, and the Justice Department is going to have to investigate and, leave no stone unturned, and it was all John Mitchell. It would have been over. Watergate would have never happened.
I think he could have easily done a Reagan. It's like, well, some guys take it a little too far. It's and he could easily say, it was my fault. I let guys get careless. They'll be punished. I'm sorry. Okay, everybody's like gets it. That kind of thing. But like I said, he was the kind of guy who had reason to be paranoid and reason not to trust anyone.
Yeah.
Which is ironically why I think he personally may have been ill-suited for the job. Not that he couldn't do it, because obviously we have all of these successes. He just personally had a temperament with justification that people were out to get him, and so he made decisions under that aegis. And he paid for it.
Yeah.
And this is why I always this is why I was thinking about Jack, whatnot, have you. It's like Jack could play. Jack had the toothy smile. Honestly, I mean, he was the photogenic guy, right, for whatever reason, right? Mm-hmm. And people just love that shit. And it's what's funny is how much, and why I tie it to the sex, how much wood behind the arrow you need to just get that little bit. What I mean by that is, what do we think about Jack? Oh, he was the sexy guy who was banging Marilyn Monroe. In order to get that image, he had to be all of this gargantuanly ugly things we mentioned, like fucking some broad in a pool, getting shot up, and having sex wherever he could, because you need that much effort to just get the little surface image of, oh, he's a sexy guy. So a lot of people are going to get consumed just to get that. Because Nixon didn't do that, he comes across as a gruff louse. So we think, in our generation, or at least the baby boomer generation, because they think sex is a cool thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people think sex is a cool thing. It's like, in order to almost like, in the movie, or not in the movies, but in the theater, you have to like stretch your performance just so people in the back can see it. It feels like that here. Jack was willing to stretch people out, forgive the expression, to really give that impression like, oh, he was the cool, slick guy. Nixon didn't do that. And he came across as the ugly, unpleasant one.
Yes.
That's the thing. And there's something to that. There's that performance attitude, which I think is key here. Like, we're so fascinated by the performance at a superficial level that we miss the performance on the delivery level of the actual office. And that's troubling to me. That was a lot of words there, but hopefully they made sense.
Because what you're basically saying is that, people were paying all the attention to the image as opposed to the actual accomplishments. And the actual accomplishments are negligible in the case of Kennedy, and they are enormous in the case of Nixon. Yeah, I can get behind that, I mean, like, everybody talks about, that Kennedy didn't blink in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He didn't blink, but he had to give up a lot in Turkey and Italy, So it wasn't the big win that he claims it was, right?
And also, let's kind of be honest here. It's like, yes, there's always the Curtis LeMays of the world saying, just fucking bomb it. But it's when you're in that situation, when the bombs are coming, and both sides realize it, you can be kind of mediocre to realize this is going to be fucking crazy to do this. Yeah. And I think if you look at how that transpired, it's like, it's one of those situations where, like, your fundamental human animal instinct says, something's wrong here. We can't do this.
Yeah.
And you stop. You don't have to be a great guy to do that.
Yeah.
You just have to not be crazy.
Yeah.
And so obviously if Curtis LeMay were at the switch, we'd be fucked. But Curtis LeMay wasn't at the switch.
Thank goodness. Yeah. No, it was really funny. Curtis LeMay, he himself said it best, that if they'd lost the war, him and a lot of other people on the American side would have been tried for war crimes for what they did, what Curtis LeMay did, insofar as the firebombing of all of Germany. That was just, but that's for another conversation. Going back to the Kennedys, look, have you noticed that none of them came to a good end? Have any of them accomplished a goddamn thing? None
Well,
of them.
one brother we didn't talk about who I wanted to was Ted, and the reason I want
Well,
to
Ted
do
did
because
did the one thing that I really thank him for. He gave the biggest fuck you very much to Hillary Clinton that she ever got. I mean, he fucked her up the ass in a way that not even Bill Clinton actually ever did. Okay, when he threw his support behind Barack Obama early in the 2008 primaries, when it mattered, when his support of Barack Obama clearly changed the dynamic of the election. Remember that, or were you too young?
no, I was old enough, but I mean, I have to recall. I believe, yeah, I know Ted how he responded to it because that was near the end of his life too, right?
Yeah,
He died around '09, I want to
I,
say.
I don't think he saw the Obama presidency. To tell you the truth, I mean, you'd have to look it up if you don't mind. Please do check it up. But okay, what happened was that this was the vibe in 2008 in the Democratic primary. Everybody was like, "It's Hillary's turn." Okay, again, it's Hillary's turn. And so, and Barack Obama had given this really, really good speech in the 2004 Democratic Convention. Then that had upped his profile. He'd been nobody. He'd been what you call it, a
He was a state
Chicago
senator.
state senator. He was a nobody. He'd lost for a congressional seat. He was a fucking loser. He was almost a has-been. Okay, let's face facts. And for people who don't know, Michelle was actually talking about divorcing him. Okay, because he was getting nowhere because she's a very ambitious woman and she wanted her whoever she was with to actually, if he's not having a big political position, at least be making a shit ton of money. He wasn't doing either one of them. And he got this plum assignment to give a speech at the Democratic National Convention. He goes and he gives a great speech because that's the only thing he's ever been good at. Giving great speeches with a lot of hollow words. Hope and change, and bullshit, bullshit. Anyway, so he gives a speech in 2004. Yeah. He's like a big hit. Everybody supports him for the 2006 Senate race, which is a gimme. He wins in the 2006 election and he becomes senator in January of 2007. In 2008, here's the mechanics of it. There was the understanding that he was going to make a run for the presidency, but it wasn't going to be a real run. Okay? This is something that people don't get. The idea, the calculation within the Democratic Party, within the Clintonistas even, was that Barack Obama was going to run for president in 2008 in the primary, give a good show, bow out after he, not to look like a wimp, and be ready for the 2016 election, and that it was going to be Hillary's in 2008. It was Ted Kennedy that upturned the apple cart in a horrifying, catastrophic way when he got the whole liberal wing of the Democratic Party to back Barack Obama and make him the Bernie Sanders of that election and fucked up and ruined Hillary's whole campaign. Because after that, she could never recover because she could never recover the base because they were all behind Barack. Good old Barry Obama. And that's how the 2008... So anyway, I'm sorry.
Ted lived through about 6 months of Obama's presidency. Now, the other thing about Ted
because Ted hated the Clintons. He hated them with a passion. So I'm sorry, just a little scuttlebutt. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I mean, no, of course, two rival families in the heart of their palace are trying to get the crown. Yeah, exactly. But so the other thing that you always have to keep in mind with Ted and with our crowd, this makes a difference. Ted is significantly responsible for the Immigration Act of '65.
Yeah.
So you want to find someone to blame, it's him.
Yeah.
So what he did achieve was depending on your perspective, certainly mine, a disaster in a very clear way. And I mean, and the other thing that people forget about him, like one of the times he really came close to really losing his seat was around 70. Remember the hard hats we were talking about during the Nixon period? So in Massachusetts, what almost knocked him over, he was very big on the forced integration of schools.
Right.
Because remember that it wasn't just the South who had white schools and black schools. The North had them too. They just did it in an interesting way, which is districting, right? Yeah. You in your community, you go to this kind of school, and in our community, we go to this kind of school, and those are just the boundaries. Well, he, in a good liberal, tried to force that. His people in Massachusetts would not put up with it.
Right.
They did not want their kids to be put from their perspective in a risky situation by virtue of being in an integrated situation.
Yeah.
He almost lost that seat
Yeah.
during that election. After that, it came as close as it ever came for him. So he did not have the perfect life. And I think part of his curse as well, because we always had, there was the joke that I even remember as a kid was Ted was always drunk, half the time. It was like I remember, I think I mentioned to you, like Dennis Miller was always one of my favorite shows. And he had a joke where he had like a picture of Kennedy getting like some sort of Humanitas award. He says, Ted is the kind of guy who would immediately trade that for a shot of Cuddy at the bar.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. But okay, so Ted Kennedy, he was the big liberal, and he followed every liberal cause to the bottom of the rabbit hole, right? And where did it lead the country? The Immigration Act, all the rest of it. Look, these people didn't do anything good for the country. Okay, forget about the brothers, the first generation after Joe Kennedy. We had John, Robert. Robert didn't do a fucking thing, because we actually, in this conversation, we haven't been systematic about going over what they actually accomplished. They didn't accomplish anything. And they say that, Robert Kennedy was a great crusader for civil rights and shit like that. Bullshit. When he was Attorney General, he
was a union buster.
Yeah, and he appointed racist judges. Yeah, I forgot about the union busting. You're absolutely goddamn right. But he appointed racist judges down south, okay, to uphold fucking Jim Crow laws and shit, right? Because it was politically expedient. These fuckers, all they cared about was political expediency and whatever was sexiest. Not what was good, because the problem is that in so much of life, things that are good for you are not sexy. I mean, think about like eating your vegetables and working out. Is there anything less sexy than either one of those two activities, right? But see, it helps you, okay? And the sexy shit, like, hookers and blow and staying up until 5 a.m., sure, that's fun, but it's horrible for you. I mean, you wind up like Christopher Hitchens, So yeah, I don't, how can I put it? The Kennedys never cared about the society they were living in. All they cared about was having a spotlight on themselves, and they would attach themselves to whatever cause, whatever idea, whatever stupid fashion craze was going on in order to keep the spotlight on themselves. They were attention whores. That's what they were.
Well, I'll give you an example on how I think it kind of played out. Because you had mentioned like the Obama situation, that certainly played out. Ted's like, I was the kingmaker. Yeah. The other time he did it earlier too, and not exactly that way, but he ran for president in '80.
Right.
And why is that a big deal? Well, that was an incumbent year. That was Jimmy Carter's year, and Ted kind of just like fucked him up the ass a little bit. There's no chance Ted's ever going to get president. I mean, after Chappaquiddick, no way. Exactly. But he did it anyway. And what did that do? It's like it gave him a little limelight and fucked Jimmy over many at a time when Jimmy was unfortunately a guy who could easily get fucked. Ted more or less obliged him. And it's like one of those things where no side is going to like win out of it or get anything out of it. Cause it's not like, Reagan, who's like, doing a test run and then he's going to go. It's like, no, this is like a downward kind of path. It's like, well, this is my last chance to feel like I'm on a campaign for something real here, so it's not out of his bag of tricks to just keep saying, hey, remember me? I'm the big guy. I'm the last of the family who matters. Yeah, there are other Kennedys around, but you don't remember their fucking names. Yeah. And the last Kennedy we all saw recently looked like a reject clone of a high school president, class president.
No, but have you noticed that of the third generation of the kids of Robert Kennedy and all their cousins and all that have you, none of them amounted to anything. They've all been. It's like one of those copy machines, the first original is pristine, Joe Kennedy, right? And then you get a copy, and it's superficially the same, but it's just not as high quality. And then the next copy is even worse, and it keeps on degrading itself. I had this friend of mine in Chile, and she actually hung out with some of those people, some of the Kennedy people, okay? She knew them, socially, and hung out with them in Hyannisport and the whole thing. And she told me stories of how they would fuck with old Rose Kennedy's pills and just mix up the pills that she was supposed to take and just like put like speed instead of some medication she was supposed to take, and the woman would be buzzed out of her gourd on whatever her grandchildren or great grandchildren were giving her, which is kind of fucking evil if you think about it. But be that as
Yeah,
it
it
may,
is.
yeah,
I was sitting here, heart palpitations. Like, oh,
yeah,
let's take her heart medication and
yeah, and give her some
like a
speed.
give her
Yeah,
a little upper.
yeah,
Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
exactly. I mean, I mean, at the time when I heard the story, I was like, fucking what? I was 19. I thought it was cool. I thought it was funny. Not cool, but funny. Now I'm like, that's fucking wrong. Okay. I mean, if I'd found whoever the kid was doing that, I would have kicked the ever living shit out of the kid, because you could kill an older person like that easily. Yeah, the woman's 90 something. She's gonna die anyway. But still, you don't fucking mess with a elderly person's meds, right? Anyway, she was telling me how they were like very cliquish, and they were always the cool kids, and they were always the richest kids, and they flashed the money, even though there were other families that had more money and didn't flash it and weren't so cool, but they used money. And here's what's interesting. As I understand it, their fortune has decayed substantially. Okay. Joe Kennedy, at the time of his death, right, he had the equivalent of a multi-billionaire. He was very well off. And in just a few short decades, because there are just very few, apparently most of that money's gone. The only one who's held on to a lot of the money is, what's her name? John Kennedy's daughter.
Oh yeah, I forgot her name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, she married that Schlossberg guy, who, don't be confused, he's not a German aristocrat. He's actually, basically a Lower East Side New Yorker, from some shtetl in wherever the fuck, and they just changed their name. But anyway,
Exactly.
yeah. But the point is that most of the others, their fortunes, their trust fund is dwindling rapidly. They made some horrible financial decisions. There's some big building out in Chicago that Joe Kennedy owned. You would know about that. He had this. It was a big building, a market, something or other, just a big fucking building that he sold, and that they sold rather. Not he sold. He bought it for chump change during the Depression. And it, it rented out and just was a huge money earner. I mean, the income from that was huge, and they sold it to some developers, and of course lost that income. I mean,
well, the Merchandise Mart, yeah,
the Merchandise Mart, which I don't know the property. I've not looked at the numbers, but
the Merchandise Mart is a big, substantial building in the city. It's now turned into like a tech incubator type building. Like all these startups are. A lot of like I said, local, not local merchants, but anybody selling like high end wares, be they furniture or heavily designed stuff, it goes in the Merchandise Mart. My mother actually used to work in the Merchandise Mart when she was working in advertising. They were in there, so it's a big deal.
Okay, so they sold that building. Okay, and they didn't get much out of it. I mean, look, if you sell an asset, the money's going to slip through your fingers. Okay, so you got to sell an asset and put that money into another asset as quickly as possible. It's just going to slip through your fingers like water, because that's how money goes. It just goes like water. Okay, and so anyway, I think that the Kennedys, in 20 years or so, because you hear every once in a while some Kennedy family member up in the news. About 20 years ago, there was a whole case of William Kennedy Smith, who got into trouble. He was alleged to have raped some woman, and there was a whole investigation, and in the end, nothing happened. But the point I'm trying to make is that, see, all these people, they're just decaying. They're just going down and down. And I know, like, there was this Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
Yep.
She was the governor of Maryland, I think it was, and she was undistinguished. She just got there on the strength of her name and family money, and money that is disappearing, a name that is being forgotten. So they're becoming a joke. And so, from my thinking is that if I were Joe Kennedy's ghost, I'd be just so upset that everything I worked for and struggled for, and everything I did to have, a great family that became a great dynasty, they were just losers, and they're vanishing.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I was thinking to myself, because Clinton took the Clinton family, in theory, took the spot of the big Democratic Party family. But I think to myself, well, no, it's not like there was any big player in the Clintons, like, I'm going to make a dynasty of Clintons, and I made money, and this is like a family that's going to supersede me. It's more like, no, Bill had some success, and now he's got to keep laundering the money, and that money is gone. And I don't really think that there's any realistic chance of like Chelsea getting any more than like a congressional seat, maybe if she's ever lucky
No,
a Senate.
Actually, I would venture to say that the that the Clintons are a civic nationalist clan, in the sense that you can be a Clintonista without having been born genetically into the family. You know what I mean?
Oh God.
Yeah, I think.
Well,
Look,
that's the other thing. They're not a good Catholic family.
yeah, they had the one
Neither one
daughter
can be.
who's just, I mean, in the looks department, poor thing. I mean, you could see when she was little, poor thing. And the thing is, and apparently she's like an entitled little spoiled brat. So.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I've heard people say it a lot.
But the Clinton family, quote unquote, is extended to people like Huma Abedin, right? Some staffer who was loyal and who attached herself to Hillary Clinton. And, Bill Clinton has a lot of people like that. A lot of people who are Clintonistas who are loyal to them and will forever be loyal to them. Look, the whole Podesta crowd, all those people, and they're like a mafia family. And like I said, they're a civic nationalist family. They're not an ethno-nationalist. You don't have to be born a Clinton to be a Clinton. You know what I mean?
Here's a good comparison. You'll love this. The Kennedys were more like the Corleone family, which was true family. The Cosa Nostra.
Yeah.
But the Clintons are more like the Chicago outfit. It's a business.
Yeah, it's the Chicago outfit. It's the business.
And she's from our suburban area, so it works. See, you gotta give me credit for that.
Okay, and so on that note of comparing the Clintons and Kennedys to various mafia families, we're going to call it a podcast. Dr. Benway, why don't you take us out?
Kids, be good to the ladies who happen to show up in a pool you happen to be in. Don't do anything nasty.
Yes, don't do anything nasty. Think of your mother and then act accordingly.
Exactly. If you can't tell Ma, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the Coach and Benway podcast. I'm your co-host, Coach Red Pill. For my co-host, Dr. Benway, so long and see you later.
Bye-bye.